Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Capital G here with an EDH deck tech for you. Daretti, Savant, Mono Red Planswalker. Loves to play around with some artifacts. It's going to be a fun deck. Let's have a look at it. Alright, Daretti, Savant. You might have heard of him. He's a higher tier commander. He doesn't look like a commander, but he looks more like a Planeswalker, but it says right here that he can be played as your commander. So, Wizards, thank you for Commander 2014. Anyways, he's got a neat little +2 here. Discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. You can discard 0 cards and draw 0 cards and still give him a +2. You can also -2. Pop an artifact that you have in play, get one from your graveyard, put that into play. And you also have -10, which says that anytime one of your artifacts would be put into your graveyard from the battlefield, it comes right back at the beginning of the next end step. I've gotten that ultimate off 2 times, I think, at this point. It doesn't happen too often since I liberally use that -2 ability. But when it does go off, it's pretty nifty. Some instants and sorceries that'll back him up. We're definitely going to play up the scavenger aspect of this with cards like Tormenting Voice. That discards a card, lets you draw 2. Wild Guess, which also lets you discard a card to draw 2. And Cathartic Reunion to discard 2 cards and draw 3. By the way, if you don't get the feels from this, you are a cold, cold human being. Impact Resonance. Somebody's tossing some damage around, you can toss it right back with this thing. Whatever damage is dealt in any given turn, you can drop this and deal that damage right back to a whole bunch of creatures, divided as you choose. Neat little combat trick. Chaos Warp. Takes a permanent off the battlefield, and if you're lucky, they don't get a better one. Trash for Treasure. This is a card that definitely inspired Daretti. Sacrifice an artifact, return an artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. Madcap Experiment. Because we're playing a lot of artifacts in this deck, you can use this and you keep flipping cards until you flip an artifact, put that artifact into play. So you can cheat another artifact into play with this card. And, I mean, you'll take damage for any card you reveal that isn't an artifact. But if you end up taking more than 5 damage from this card, then you got real unlucky. Volcanic Offering. You choose a non-basic land and a target to receive 7 damage. And then an opponent chooses a non-basic land and a target to receive 7 damage. And the best part is, it can't be anything that you own. So no one can touch your lands, nobody can touch you or your creatures with this. Just toss it out there and watch things burn. Scrap Mastery. How does this read? Each player exiles their artifacts, then returns artifacts from their graveyard to the battlefield, then puts the exiled artifacts into their graveyard. It's Living Death, but in red and 4 artifacts. It is awesome. Couple of sweepers here. Blasphemous Act. Easy 13 damage to everything. And Starstorm. Pretty easy X damage to everything. And you can always cycle it away if you need to. A few mana rocks here with Mind Stone. Taps for a colorless or tap sacks for a card. Fire Diamond to tap for red. Unstable Obelisk. Taps for colorless or 7 taps to destroy a permanent. Commander Sphere. This is good for the tapping for a color and a free sacrifice for a card. Dreamstone Hedron taps for 3 colorless, or you can draw 3 cards and by sacking this off. Pristine Talisman gains you life, gives you mana, and Solving, of course, tapping for 2. We also have a Lotus Bloom. You can't cast it normally, you'd have to cast it with Suspend, but it taps and sacks for 3 mana. How is this useful? By having Salvaging Station. This comes from 5th Dawn. It was a pretty nifty cycle. What this one does, it lets you Return an artifact costs 1 or less, that includes Lotus Bloom, from your graveyard to the battlefield, just by tapping. And as an added bonus, every time a creature goes to the graveyard, you get an untap on the salvaging station. And if someone, say, rafts while you have this on the board, there's 10 creatures, there's 10 separate untap triggers. So you can use these untap triggers to return Lotus Bloom or a card like Pirate Spellbomb, which can then be sacrificed for damage or card. You can return Wayfarer's Bauble to pull more lands from your deck and put it onto the battlefield. You can sack off Conjurer's Bauble to draw a card at no mana cost, and you can even bring back some cards from your graveyard into your deck if there's, say, a red creature or a Planswalker that you can't recur with Daretti. You just put it back on the bottom of the deck, and you'll have your chance to draw it again later. Mycosynth Wellspring. When it enters the battlefield, you get to search for your deck for basic land, put it in your hand. Same thing happens when it's put into the graveyard. Eco Wellspring does a similar thing, except it's a straight up card draw in both instances. Nim Deathmantle. This is probably the... If it isn't obvious, this deck already has a higher level of play than other decks in my collection. Of course, this one is whenever a creature you control would be put into the graveyard from play, you pay 4, you get it back. And the Dim Deathmantle equips to it. Pretty nifty. That works. Crucible of Worlds. Another big card. This one lets you play lands from your graveyard. And since we're going to be putting a whole bunch of cards into our graveyard using our scavenging cards and with Daretti, just by having this in the deck, you can more liberally put your lands into your discard pile, and when you get this into the battlefield, you can start playing those lands. It's a huge difference maker. Trading Post. I love the flexibility of Trading Post. Discarding a card for life, paying a life for a goat, sacrificing a goat to get an artifact back, and sacrificing an artifact for a card. So much flexibility. Mirrorworks. Anytime you get a non-token artifact, you get to copy the non-token artifact by paying 2 extra mana. Conjurer's Closet, because enter the battlefield affects rock. Exile a creature and then get it back at the end of the turn. Lore Seeker's Stone. Since we're going to be playing out our cards pretty quick, once we have this out, we can draw cards back more liberally and easily. It's 3 mana for 3 cards with an extra mana cost for every card we already have in our hand. But we're playing red, so that's not going to be a big cost to us at all. Cage Sun to double up on our mountains and other red mana producing sources. Spine of Ishsaw. Because it's 7 mana, it blows up any permanent that we don't like. And anytime the spine would go to the graveyard, pretty easy to do in this deck, we get this back in our hand and we can use it again and again and again. Possessed Portal. This is a card I started playing with even in my earliest commander decks. It basically turns my deck spontaneously into a stacks deck. But what's evil about this is that nobody can draw cards. And once I drop this, usually I don't care about drawing cards at the time I drop this. It's a case of making sure that no one else can draw cards, because if they don't have an answer to it, the game is over. I'm gonna win it. Darksteel Forge to make all my artifacts indestructible. And I mentioned I had some Planeswalkers. There's in fact 2 of them in here. We have Cough of the Hammer, which can give me mana equal to my mountains. I can turn my mountains into a 4/4 creature. And if I manage to ultimate it, which I've yet to do at this point, I can turn all my mountains into damage sources. Tap for a damage, tap for a damage, tap for a damage for the rest of the game. Ugin, Spirit Dragon, because he can exile all colored permanents. I don't have a lot of colored permanents in this deck, so he'll just come and exile all the colored permanents. Or I could just throw some damage around and build up to that ultimate, which is pretty sweet. Draw 7 cards, play 7 cards for free, and gain 7 life. There's a reason he was one of the big cards from Fate Reforged. How about some creatures? We have one of my favorite trilogies, the Mere Retriever, Junk Diver, and Workshop Assistant. All three of them, when they die, will bring an artifact back from your graveyard to your hand. We have the Pilgrim's Eye. Pulls a basic land from your deck, puts it in your hand when it comes into play. We have Scarecrow. He can sack himself off to draw a card. He can also pay 4 tap and return an artifact creature from the graveyard to play. Lots of value here. Palladium. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. Palladium. Taps for 2 colorless mana. Of course, we have Filigree Familiar and his older brother Solemn Simulacrum. Because when they die, they draw cards. He gains you life when he comes in. He gains you a basic land and from your deck into play taps when he comes in. Some bigger creatures here. The Steel Hellkite. An artifact creature dragon. You can pump up his attack. And if he hits your opponent, you can pay X to start destroying some of his permanents. It's pretty cool. Scuttling Doom Engine. You can't chump block him, you have to block with something significant if you're going to get in his way at all. He's a 6/6 for 6, pretty cheap, pretty efficient. And whenever he goes to the graveyard, you can throw 6 damage to an opponent. We also have Wormcoil Engine, also a 6/6 for 6, but he's got Death Touch and Lifelink. And when he dies, he splits into 2, literally. He splits into a 3/3 Death Toucher and a 3/3 Lifelinker. Duplicate because he exiles opponent's creatures and becomes as big as whatever creature it is he exiles. Mere Battlesphere. It's 5 artifacts for the price of 1. And not only is he a beefy attacker, but I can also use those tokens to get back real artifacts, shall we say. Same thing with the Penavis. Because he can turn his +1/+1 counters, comes in with 5. He can turn them into 1/1 Pentavite tokens and then turn them back into +1/+1 counters. You can do a lot of sneaky stuff with this. Bosch Iron Golem, because throwing artifacts at people's faces for damage is a way to win. It's a good way to win. He's also a 6/7 trample, so he's very efficient in combat as well. Metalwork Colossus. I just like to call it the budget Colossus since I've long traded away my Darksteel Colossus and I never owned the Blightsteel. But what's nice about him, he's a 10/10 and he comes out for super cheap. Ignore the 11 because we're going to have a whole bunch of non-creature artifacts in play when we drop him. And some colored creatures to help us out. The Goblin Welder, which taps and sacrifices an artifact to get another one back from our graveyard into play. We have Feldon of the Third Path. He takes a creature that's in your graveyard, mostly artifact creatures, and puts an artifact token copy of it into the battlefield for a turn. Can do some pretty cool stuff with him. Quicksmith Genius. He is an all-star in this deck. Every time you have an artifact go into play, you can discard a card to draw a card. Every time. You can go through your deck so fast with this guy. It is insane how good he is here. We have the Spawn of Thraxus. It's 5/5, but when he comes in, he deals damage equal to the number of mountains you control to a target, I believe creature or player. We have Tyrant's Familiar, just to have another dragon beat face. A 5/5 for 7, that's essentially a 7/7 for 7 with haste when you have Daretti out on the field. And he also gets to blow away a target every time he turns sideways. 7 damage to target creature. And we have Akum Hellkite. It's a 4/4 for 6, but whenever you drop land, you deal 1 damage. If the land is a mountain, you deal out 2 damage. So why did I put him last? Well, there are 24 mountains in the deck. And I'm playing Valakut, because mono red, of course you're going to play Valakut. Once you have 5 mountains in play and Valakut is on the battlefield, you'll pitch your excess mountains into the graveyard with Daretti. Play them play your mountains from the graveyard using the Crucible of Worlds and deal out damage and gain card advantage all at the same time. We also have the Inventor's Fair. Just by having 3 artifacts out, we can pay 4 tap and sack this off to get another artifact. He also gains us life every turn that he's out there, as long as we have a whole bunch of artifacts. And he taps for a colorless, and it comes in untapped. Superb card. Drown Your Temple is another land that we can just pitch to the graveyard with Daretti, and we can pair 3 mana and put it into play tapped, and actually ramp that way. Of course, we're playing Great Furnace and Darksteel Citadel. They're both artifact lands that are easily recurable, both with the Crucible of Worlds and the Salvaging Station. We have Buried Ruin. Sacrifice it to return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. We have Tomb of the Spirit Dragon for a little bit of life gain. Since we have a lot of colorless creatures, we can gain life equal to the number of colorless creatures we have turn after turn if we need it. Phyrexia's Core gains us 1 life and gives us a sacrifice outlet for our artifacts if we need it. Dormant Volcano helps us ramp a little bit. It'll slow us down the turn it's played, but speed us up after that. We have Temple of the False God, which definitely speeds us up if we already have 4 of the lands in play when we drop this. Forgotten Cave for a little bit of cycling. Arcane Lighthouse for a little bit of politics. Being able to remove Shroud and Hexproof from creatures is by paying mana and tapping this. Even if we don't care so much, other players do. I also have an Evolving Wilds in the deck. And you'll be seeing that I've got a lot of decks that have an Evolving Wilds, but not a Terramorphic Expanse. I just don't have that many copies of Terramorphic Expanse. I do, however, have a Strip Mine here. And I have a Ghost Quarter to help take out any of those annoying lands that I don't like. And with that in mind, that is Daretti. Yeah, honestly, there isn't really much more that can be said about Daretti. He's got a very clear game plan. You want to play artifacts, but it's up to you, the player, to decide which artifacts you want to play with, which combinations you like. Do you have any favorites? Which artifacts would you play in your Daretti deck? Comment below, and I will see you next time.